It's a great pleasure to be up here on stage with a true legend of photography. I'm Dewi Lewis, I'm a publisher, and I've known Bruce Gilden for around about 30 years. It sounds like an AA confession or something there, but we first met, I'm going to keep this very short, but we first met at Frankfurt Book Fair. And this guy turned up at the stand, the stand we had at the publishers there, with two enormous trolleys full of boxes of prints. I mean, really, he must have had 200 or 300 prints. Enormous weight.
And then, he didn't say how the quality, you know, but go ahead.
No, but yeah. So, very enthusiastically and very energetically, he then proceeded to open a couple of boxes. And the first one that, that he showed me was his New York work. And I turned to him after he'd sort of shown about 5 or 6 pictures to me, and I said, yes, I'd really want to do it. And it was as if he hadn't heard me. He clearly wasn't believing that that was, yes, I want to do a book. And he kept on showing and showing and showing. And I kept saying, yes, I do want to do the book. And I have to say why. And it's because, for me, there was such a voice there. And I think that's the thing about Bruce's work. Bruce has a unique, dynamic voice within his imagery. And so there's a style, there's an approach, but there's a true content that's very meaningful and very deep. And that's why he is still a great legend of photography and still doing great work. And now I give you Mr. Bruce Gilden.
Thank you. Is that mine? I don't need. Okay. I actually paid Dowie 50 quid for that introduction. No, actually, I love Dowie. We've been friends for a long time, but let's get into this. It's funny because Dowie, I'm not going to talk long because we have a lot of pictures to look at, 274, which are too many, but it's only actually part of my work, and it's funny that he said I showed him all these boxes of prints. But I should say I'm basically what is known as a street photographer, and when I first started photography, I read the quote by Robert Capa that said, if it's not good enough, you're not close enough, and that resonates with me till this day. And the other quote that my wife showed me maybe a year ago, I probably had read it 20 times, but you know, at my age, I had forgotten about it, was the one by Robert Frank. It's important to see what's invisible to the others. And I think that's where the artist comes in. Okay, here we go. What am I doing here? It says next, nothing's happening. Well, that's my first photograph. I said next. Okay. Uh-oh. The computer, oh, there it goes. He reminds me of Little Britain. He said the computer says no. Okay. Anyway, all right. So one day in, wow, I'm getting old, 1969, I decided I was living in Queens, and here goes the computer. It still says no. So I guess we're just finished now. Have any questions? It's not working. They're only giving me till 8 o'clock, so if we don't start till a quarter after, we're not even getting through the pictures. But go ahead. Huh? Oh, yeah, sure. Now, that's not even the first picture. Any questions? There we go. Okay. So we're in 1969. I was living in Queens at the time, and to get to Coney Island was very difficult, even by public transportation, but it was more difficult because somebody stole my car. So it took me 2.5 hours. I hitchhiked there. Don't ask me why, but I was much younger, 23 years old. And I get there, and as smart and as streetwise as I am, is as dumb as I can be. It was the middle of May. During the week, there was nobody there. The only guy who was there was this guy called Little Louie. And I said, would you mind posing in front of the dragon? And he told me all the time that he was going to the dentist that day because he had very bad teeth. Pay where? No, so now I got to do this. If I fall off of here, somebody catch me, please. Wait, it's not my fault, right? Okay.
It's got an annoying button that says,
I'm Jewish, but I don't have Jewish guilt. Well, yeah, well, this is starting off wonderfully.
sadly, we're going to have to point it at the laptop.
Oh, shit. Okay, I have to point, wait. I'm going to get dizzy here. One second, I want to see, wait, I want to see where I am. Hold on, wow, now we're back to Coney Island. What? Okay, I'll tell you in the next one. Okay, next. I've done this before where I had to say next all the time. Okay, now this picture, you have to be able to read English, and it says, see her change from Beauty to Beast, and I never knew which phase she was in. Okay, go ahead, let's go. This is the most laughs. After this, we go faster, okay? Otherwise, we'll be here forever. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, next. This is the first picture that I thought had any artistic credibility, and I called it, even though all my pictures are untitled, Fellini. Next. What I like, these were lovers, I presume, and I like that the Japanese guy the guy's belly is as big as the Japanese guy. Go ahead. My wife, I'm Jewish, like I said, all my wives have been non-Jewish, and my first wife, who was Catholic, called this the three graces. Go ahead. I don't know why, but lots of times women like to take their breasts out for me. But seriously, what happened here, this is not a very good picture. It's a corny picture. I don't like cliche pictures. I don't like one-line joke pictures, okay? And a lot of street photography today is about that, and I don't rate it at all, okay? So, you know, I'll always say my piece, you know, what people like or don't, but I won't mention names, but like some others have done in the past. Now, the thing is, about this, why I show it is she was an alcoholic. And it was in May, nobody was at Coney Island, so she was sitting talking with a black gentleman, so I had nothing to do. I talked to them for about an hour. She told me she got burned on the breast last night, so she took out one, so I said, why don't you take out the other? It'll make a good picture. And there it goes, okay, go ahead. You think the guy in the center is crazy. He's the only normal one. It's the Polar Bear Club. It's in January, and it's freezing out, okay. This, I was disappointed in the picture, but I was using a Leica at the time, which I still use, and you can't focus very close. So all I saw from a distance was like a mouth that looked like a tunnel.
Go ahead.
Well, that's another story. This guy, I had to get a release for a magazine. Otherwise, they didn't want to publish the pictures. So I went to Coney Island in like March or something, and I found him, and he took me up to his room. And it was floor-to-ceiling newspapers, but I love it about the shoe. You see his shoe? It looks almost like a clown's shoe. Go ahead. Self-explanatory. It's reflective breasts. Go ahead. Bohack, I don't know if you know, is a food chain, and I always say this guy never leaves home without his groceries. Interesting story. This is how Coney Island used to be in the 40s and 50s. You know, before there was air conditioning, before people had money to travel, and it was very crowded. So, but the good story is one day I'm home, and I get a call from Japan. And the guy calls who used to be the head of Vogue in Korea, then in Japan, who used to also be married to Nico of the Velvet Underground. So I say to myself, wow, he's going to hire me to do a fashion job because I've done a lot of fashion in my life. So he tells me, no, I was at an opening last night. I went upstairs, and there's a bookstore. And he opened the Coney Island book, and he saw his mother. That's his mother. And she has dementia. Anyway, so I gave him a book when he came to New York. I believed him. Okay, go ahead. This is the picture, the only picture that you'll see tonight taken with a telephoto lens. And it's with 135 millimeter, and it's like two aliens going back to where they came from. Go ahead. Go ahead. Now, in the 80s, I went back to Coney Island. You see, I became more controlling. My style is much more mature. And it's funny, because sometimes I talk to people, and they say to me, Bruce, I say, they say, my favorite work is Coney Island. So it's like, I say to them, you mean to tell me that in the last 40 years I haven't improved? And I don't think my best work is Coney Island, okay? I'm hard-pressed to find 5 pictures that I really like, okay? This is the bra, and that's the finger pointing, which what happened is, when I was in, I'm talking fast because I want to get through this. When I was at Coney Island, I used to go in army jacket with long sleeves, army boots, so I didn't look like a sunbather. And I was on my knees taking this picture of this lady in her bikini, you know, which is a bra and panties. So someone came over to her and asked her, what is he taking a picture of? And she said, over there. So you see, sometimes it's very good to be close. Okay, go ahead. This I call Coney Island family because if you look at, I don't know what they're eating, but their mouths are all going in one direction. Okay, let's go, next. Okay, so in 1984, my second wife, that's my third wife here, who's the love of my life, told me, you know, Bruce, you've been photographing New York. You can't only do New York forever, okay? And she's right. So why did I pick Haiti? Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. I can go on and on and on and on. It's a 3.5-hour direct flight from New York. They have a Mardi Gras. People are in the street. And so I went to Haiti. As soon as I got there, I realized that I said to my second wife, I said, where have I been my whole life? I fell in love with the country. It's still my favorite country. I've been there 22 times. I stopped going in 94, and then I went back 3 times after the earthquake. So this I call, this is, back up, sorry. Thank you. This is in La Saline, which I call it Chagall pigs, because it looks like the little pigs are floating in the air. For all the untitled pictures, I have little pet names for them. Go ahead. This looks like a reverse Ku Klux Klan picture for me. Go ahead, I don't want to talk too much. This is the first, I believe when you go to a new country, you go anywhere, you should go out and photograph right away. So this is the first day I was in Haiti. This is Shoeshine Boys. Go ahead. Haircut. That's at an outdoor abattoir where they kill animals. I used to go every morning. This one is outside Port-au-Prince. I used to go in the afternoon there. Go ahead. I never saw many people carrying a cow's head, but here they are. This is the epitome of what Haiti is. It should be a dream, but for most people, it's a nightmare. I mean, well, it's a great place, but go ahead. This is at Plaine du Nord, the Mud Festival. Those are the taps that take the people in and out every day from the country to sell their wares. That's a descendant, I'm sure, of the Arawak Indians, which were the original inhabitants. It's about 95 degrees, which would be about 35 degrees Celsius, you know, but he's wearing his, you know, looks like a woolen hat. Okay, go ahead. That I call Best Street because I don't think I can take a better picture in the Caribbean. So every time I used to go back, I used to thank that pyramid of light. But after the earthquake, the building went down. So, you know, now there's no more building. Go ahead. This is at the cemetery. I photographed a lot at the cemetery. And that's the soccer stadium in the rear. Go ahead. The dogs are more frightened than you are of them. That's looking at the grave. Go ahead. That's the yell. A lot of people build themselves up to such a pitch. They scream at the funeral, and then they faint. So the guy's steadying her. This was used as a Kodak ad for the drama of photography. Go ahead. The prisoner, even though it's at the soccer stadium. Go ahead. Then I went back to Haiti in 2010 and 11 after the earthquake. And after 8 days, I didn't know what to photograph anymore. So I started a project, which I continued the next 2 times in color, of the Can you go back? Yeah. Of the temporary housing that's across from the palace. So people were living in these places for a year and a half with no air, in 90-degree temperature, and I'm sure lots of women got raped. I mean, it wasn't, I felt comfortable there, but I feel comfortable in a lot of places. I'm sure for Haitians, it's a dangerous place. And what's interesting is none of those great NGOs ever came here. I mean, you know, you see these guys drive around in their big cars, and they do shit. They go at night and they drink, and I'm not a big fan of NGOs, okay, so we won't get into that. Go ahead. I'm a guy that's on the ground, and if you want to do something, stay on the ground. Go ahead. So you see, these are a very political guy. He has Toussaint Louverture and Dessalines on his house. Go ahead. That's here's Alcide's house, but what's interesting, the next year I met the man, and he told me he's an English teacher. And if you notice, he has incorrect grammar here. It should be, here's Alcide's house. Go ahead. My wife, every time she sees this, says this lady was raped the night before, and she might have been. This is a candid picture. I turned and I took the picture. Go ahead. The dogs, again, are more afraid of me than I am of them. Go ahead. This is the only picture that I have a little regret for, because if someone says to me, don't photograph me, I don't. But in this situation, this guy was sitting outside the ex-presidential palace, and he never says a word. People offer him money, never says a word, totally out of his mind. But I saw something in it. It reminded me of an old Gene Smith picture of a crazy Haitian man. That was a very lovely picture. So I started to take flash pictures of him, and all of a sudden, he screamed in my face. I was about 2 feet away, and he said, "Ah!" And I jumped like 3 feet, and my assistant at the time said, "You won." I said, "It's not about winning, okay?" I said, "It's not over yet." So since I did something that's incorrect, the next day I was punished. I fell into the sewer water, and I cut my hand pretty badly. But anyway, the picture's okay. Go ahead. This looks like the guy's dead in his car, but a lot of people at that time were sleeping in their cars. And I wanted to go back to do a whole essay on it. By the time I got around to going back, they weren't sleeping in their cars any longer. Go ahead. This is after the funeral. I think the suit's a little too large for him, but go ahead. These are 2 women after the funeral. This is a very beautiful picture for me. It looks like an African wooden sculpture. These are the guys that help you get your rides to the country. They don't almost care where you're going. They just want to bring you to a tap-tap so the tap-tap driver probably gives a little money to each one. And I really like this picture. Go ahead. Now, this is part which I'm going to try and get a book on. I have about 60 of these temporary quarters across from the presidential palace, which is quite interesting because none of these Haitians were allowed near the presidential palace when Duvaliers were there or Avril or anybody. And they were using the electricity from the palace. It was funny. Go ahead. That's beautiful. Now, I mean, come on, that should be in a museum. Look how gorgeous that is. That's unbelievable. That's my favorite. Go ahead. I guess it's barbershop, but it's the Baba shop. This reminds me of a Farm Security Administration photograph. Go ahead. Now we went to Ireland. I think it was 94, 95. I had a commission by the Gallery of Photography in Ireland, and we decided to do people at the racetrack. And what struck me there is all the conversations that they would have with each other. Go ahead. They're always passing and racing, because there's the track official odds, and also you have all the bookies outside, that the odds are always changing. So everyone's always racing past each other, and since I use a 28mm lens and I work closely, I would just stand over there and see what passed me by. Go ahead. Each project I do a little differently, but I'm always photographing myself and things that interest me, and I think that's the trick. These guys are looking at the TV screen. Wow, I'm talking so fast I don't even understand myself. Does anybody have trouble understanding what I say? Okay, all right, go ahead. Only my wife, because she's French. Go ahead. But that's a 27-year thing. Go ahead. All right, it's quite funny because I just had a lecture in Milan, and I always used to joke. There's a lot of farmers that go to the horse meets, okay? And they have like 4- and 5-day meets, and this is in Listowel, and it's, I think, the end of the season. It's in September. And this, obviously, the jacket is a little short, and they don't, some of the farmers, being quite rural, they don't cut the label off, and I think that's coming into style now, somebody told me, but look at me, look how I dress. Anyway, so I made a joke always, who the fuck is Sergio Rossi? But I found out that the guy who was helping me, he was assisting me in my workshop in Milan, his wife works for Sergio Rossi. And it's a very fancy, expensive label. So I don't know how he got the coat. Go ahead. That guy looks like a gangster, but actually if he takes his hat off, he's bald with a rim of hair. He looks totally like an English gentleman. He's a bookie. Go ahead. There it is, the mixing of the classes in Ireland, like you don't have in England. See, they're talking to each other. Go ahead. This guy, I never really liked him. I don't think he liked me. And on the last day, after 2 years of photographing 5 weeks, each summer. I photographed him because I liked how the button on his jacket, it looks like if he takes a breath in or breath out, it's going to pop. Go ahead. This was the cover of the book. It's called After the Off, with an essay by Dermot Healy. Go ahead. That, to me, is about the old man, and that was him as a little boy. And as a little boy, he's questioning, but as an old man, his life, everything is complete. Go ahead. And that's another farmer. Go ahead. Then, in 1972 or 74, I saw a wonderful show called New Japanese Photography. And I don't know if you know, but I'm very critical, and I was really blown away by the show. It only took me 20 years to get to Japan. So when I got to Japan, I saw that everything changed. But anyway, I did a book called Go. That's on the subway. Go ahead. Ah, here we go again. I didn't ask her to do this, okay? And I felt, it's not a very good picture. The reason I show it is because Eiko Ozoe, who was one of the Japanese master photographers, was a friend of mine, and I lectured for him in Japan, and he told me, Japanese women don't do this in public, and it's the first time he ever saw it. So she asked me for 1,000 yen, which was $10, and I was willing to give it to her to leave me alone, because behind me were all these Yakuza. And I hoped that they didn't think I asked her to do that, because, I might not be here talking to you. Okay, go ahead. This is in a place called Sanya that nobody at the museums or galleries, they'd ask me, where do you like to photograph? And I say Sanya. And it's on the outskirts of Japan, of Tokyo, and it's where all the psychopaths, it's the end of the line, okay? And this is in Sanya. Go ahead. That's my wife's favorite Japan picture. That was the candid portrait. Look at the size of his hands. Go ahead. I love that lipstick. These are two Yakuza. And just before I took this picture, I had done a whole roll of film that I hadn't wound through the camera. So you can imagine, because I was on click 42 or something. I said, this can't be. I was so annoyed, but you have to get it together. And being a pro, I did. So I was able to get this. Go ahead. These are Bozo Zoko, and they're like in between teenagers and Yakuza. And these are motorcycle kids, and I had done this article, I'd done this for work for a French magazine, and I thought, oh boy, they're gonna really be, fake. But every kid here, he's gonna be the boss. This is the good-looking guy. He's the muscle who's an alcoholic. They were formed totally at 16. So I wanted to photograph them until I died or they died, but the lady who was helping me, who had studied photography in New York, calls me in Osaka one day, and she said, I asked them, they said they couldn't be photographed now because they're doing a television show, and she tried to push it. So that was the end of that, okay? You can't have a woman in Japan pushing Yakuza or Bozo Zoko, because they have leaders, older men. Okay, go ahead. This was a tough picture to take because I saw the guy and I wanted to have people walking past him. It's more documentary than most of my other photographs. I had to get up every time the light changed. I got up, I went down. I did it for 20 minutes, and it was quite tiring, but I got an okay picture. Go ahead. That's the toenail. That's in a place in Osaka where you take your life in your hands, I can tell you. I had to keep my camera in the bag. I wouldn't take it out. I had 2 box cutters pulled on me, which I don't respond very kindly to. I'm a little bit as crazy as they are, but it just wasn't worth it. So I saw this sleeping bag, and I said, something's not right here. And the next thing I know, I saw his toenail. It's not a great picture, but it just reminds me of something that happened in my life. Go ahead. That reminds me a little bit of my mother, which is a tough thing for me. Go ahead. That's in Asakusa. This I call Francis Bacon. It's not as good as his early paintings, though. The early paintings are wonderful. Okay, go ahead. This guy looks like he's reaching for a gun, but he's probably just a businessman going for a cigarette. Go ahead. That looks like it's in the morgue, but it's thank God for black and white, he's actually getting his hair dyed. Go ahead. That's Abe George, who's a very famous guy. He was a Yakuza who went to jail and wrote an autobiography. He's one of the few Yakuza that I was told that comes from a rich family. So when you walk in the street with him, everybody, wants his autograph. He's very famous. Go ahead. He was also once knocked out by Robert Mitchum, the actor. And his young wife said, why don't you get in touch with Robert Mitchum again? He laughed at her because he didn't want to get knocked out again. This is a low-level Bozozoko, Yakuza, sorry. Let's go, because otherwise we'll never get there. Go ahead. These are two Yakuza in Ginza. This picture was taken in a coffee shop. Go ahead. That's a guy who was drunk in the street for hours. I ripped my pants that day taking the picture. My wife came with our daughter who had chicken pox. So my wife was she's very clever. She put makeup all on her face, otherwise they wouldn't let her in the country. And the poor girl had like 103 fever. And guy was lying in the street. Obviously probably an ex-Yakuza. That's a drunk and a drug addict probably now. Go ahead. That's the guy who was our liaison for the Bozozoko, and I say, I never saw him without his bandana, so I say he probably has an open head, and his head had an open hole, and you have the volcanic smoke coming out. Go ahead. That's the last picture of Japan. Go ahead. Since I'm getting a little older now, I went through my unorganized archives, and I found I have all these really good pictures, most of them without flash, from the street. So I'm going to do a book on it. So these are 5 that I have been seen once, okay? The others, well, the ones you're seeing have all been seen once, but most of the others nobody's ever seen. Go ahead. Go ahead. That's a beauty. No one's ever seen that, okay? Go ahead. My contribution to car photography. Go ahead. This is interesting because those guys around them are all bodyguards, because this guy's a big guy that was at the UN in South America. I didn't know that, and that's his young girlfriend, obviously. You know, when the cat's away, the mice will play. And he gave me his card, but that was like 30 years ago. I never called him. I should have if I was smart, because I could have done anything I wanted in this country. Go ahead. Then we go to New York City, my lifetime work, but I stopped photographing there 4 years ago unless somebody hires me. Go ahead, Broadway. San Gennaro. I saw him from a block away. I mean, I couldn't, well, that's not true, but I couldn't miss. He looked like a slinky coming down the street. I mean, look at that outfit in 1980s. It was 30 years, 40 years out of style. We call him Lefty Louie. I don't know. His name is probably Max. Go ahead. That's at the San Gennaro Festival. I love, it's very New York. You have egg cream there, you know. Go ahead. That guy just started to get down on the ground, and I like the contrast between him and the guy in the suit who couldn't give a shit with his hand in his pocket. Go ahead. Belmont Racetrack. Mooney's on 34th Street. I always said that this is a comment. It looks like a bridal cake because the shadow looks like, you know, the 2 male and female figures on a wedding cake. And I say this is a comment on marriage, male and female relationships. But someone pointed out to me that guy's blind, and they're right. That's why they're arm in arm. Go ahead. My boxing promoter. Go ahead. Go ahead. This is funny. I'm a good editor, I think, of my work. And I left this out of my first book. And it's my favorite New York picture. I call it Fake Mustache. Look, everything is fake. Look at that. I think if you take his face off, you'll find wires underneath. I mean, go ahead.
Who was he, Bruce? Who was the guy?
I have no idea. I don't talk to these people, even though they are my friends. That I called a giant because it was freezing cold. I took about 6 pictures. I don't take many pictures anyway. I took about 6 pictures that day. It was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I saw this huge guy leading this blind lady, and I called a giant. Go ahead. That was after 1 week after 9/11. I was printing a book here, so I missed 9/11. I was really aggravated that I missed it because New York, you know, I'm a New Yorker, that's my city. So I had an assignment from Newsweek to go down to Wall Street the day it opened, and I took this guy. Go ahead. I call him Mrs. America. Go ahead. That's about mother-daughter relationships. It's like the daughter is pushing the mother over the cliff. I have to live with these pictures, so I better make up stories about them. Go ahead. Rich man looking. I knew I married the right woman because I asked her, what picture do you want as a gift? And she wanted this one. That's at San Gennaro. Go ahead. An old blues musician, not really, going home. Go ahead. Then I did a short story in Siberia about a small-time gangster. Now he's in jail for life, I think, because him and his friend killed a policeman. They say when he fights, you know, the elephants puke or something, or whatever. He's great. Sergey was great. Scary, but great. But he was great with me. Go ahead. That's Sergey. Look at the size of him. Go ahead. He spent half of his life in jail, and he was 30 at this time. Go ahead. That's a... Be quiet as a cat if you're a thief. That's a symbolic tattoo in Russia for the prison guys. That's his friend. So, of course, I had to tell him, can you hold it? So I make sure I got the shot, you know. And the poor guy is really, you know. But that's Sergey. Go ahead. That's his wife. See, if you stay long enough with someone, you start to look alike. And that's what it... Don't take offense, Sophie. Sorry. That's what it's like to live 60 kilometers outside of Yekaterinburg, you know, brutal winters, okay? Go ahead. Then I did a project starting in 2008 to 2011 on foreclosures. I don't know if you know about it, but I'm not going to talk about it. It was in Fort Myers. Go ahead. These are the houses that got repossessed by the banks because the people couldn't pay it because they were giving loans to people who couldn't afford the houses. So this is my comment. Go ahead. Go. He has nothing to do with foreclosures, but I liked him, so I threw him in. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Then in 2009, I went to Detroit. That's an incredible place. I used to walk go back please, into these houses at 6 in the morning. You never knew who'd be in there. You know, it could be a junkie. You'd take your life in your hands, or the house could collapse. I mean, many stories, but that's for another time. Go ahead. That's the auto capital of the world. I was on one street called Robinwood, and the cops told me to go there because they stopped me because they thought I was in the area going to buy drugs. And I had just arrived in Detroit, and I showed them a paper, you know, what I was doing, and they said, you got to go to Robinwood Street. I said, why? They said, you'll see. Out of 73 houses, 56 of them, this is not Robinwood Street, 56 of them were almost burnt. It was scary, okay? And I went there at night, wow, and I did some flash pictures. Oof. Go ahead. That's not in Robinwood. Go ahead. Then I went to Fresno, which is one of the worst places in America. Go ahead. I got into more trouble there, not even taking pictures, just living. I mean, I was stopped more times by the police and had incidents with people that had nothing to do with the camera. Go ahead. Go ahead. This was, they have a lot of West Nile disease, so this is a mansion out there. So I went to the guy who is in charge of eradicating the mosquitoes. So he gave me a list of addresses. So I was, you know, you have to sneak in, and if the cops catch you there, you're going to have a problem. So I was pretty afraid because I didn't want to be caught by the cops. So I did this in about 2 minutes, the picture. Go ahead. There's another story here. That's near the fairgrounds, but we won't get into it. Then we went to Las Vegas and Reno. That was the end of the project. Okay, and there's a book that I have that's done by my friend John Ellery at Brown's. Go ahead, called Foreclosures. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. And then we went to Rochester. This was a Postcards for America Magnum project. The great thing about going to different places, you don't know if you're going to find anything to photograph there. So in this one, we had 10 Magnum photographers, me and 9 others. All of us except Alex Webb lived in the same house. I would go up to my bedroom. Everyone else was there bullshitting, giving out information, but I'm not giving out my information because they're not going to give me anything, okay? So the thing is that you had to do 100 pictures in 10 days. So obviously, you can't do 100 pictures in 10 days. You know, a lot of them are going to be crap, but we did it, okay? And here's the work. Go ahead. You'll see some of it. That was a blood. That was his funeral. He was killed. Go ahead. That's a picture I really like. Go ahead. That's what the neighborhoods look like. So if you're a street photographer, there's really not much you can do there. The streets are empty. Empty. And most of America, the streets are empty. Okay. Go ahead. Ah, good story. We were driving around. It was March. It was very, very cold. It was windy. I saw this lady, and that's her nephew, I found out. She was walking. She turns out to be 90 years old. She had a gold hat, gold shoes, very fancily dressed. You know, he's walking. We couldn't find a parking spot for 10 minutes, so I ran. I found her. So, of course, I'm using my Leica, but I can't take the picture with the Leica because the flash will make the picture blurry because of the shutter speed. So I had to switch to the Nikon, make sure that they don't leave because she's freezing cold. So I finally got the thing all together with the Nikon, and I take a picture, and every time I snap the shutter, she would go, cheese. I mean, I'll remember that till the day I die. She was very cute. Go ahead. This is another story. I would, to find pictures, you have to drive around, okay, because there's nothing on the streets. So I drove around. I saw this guy with this wonderful thing getting a haircut in his front yard. So I get out, and there were like 10 people there. It must have been his wife. She was drunk. I get out, and she says, what the fuck are you doing here? So I'm not easily persuaded. He said, let the man speak. She went in the house. God knows she could have got a gun or something, but I don't think like that. And he said, what's the story? I said, I love, what you're wearing to take, get your head shaved. He said, and I would like to take a picture. He said, go ahead. So you see, go ahead. Next. This is a blind guy in a record store, and his name is Ken, and he asked me the most simple, and I can't remember, I'm sorry, beautiful questions, because he couldn't see. And I asked, can I take your portrait? Go ahead. That's a studio drummer. We were getting thrown out of the diner when I took this picture because the lady gave me permission to photograph, but I never asked to photograph her. So I guess she got it. So I said, so I had to take one more, and this was it. Go ahead. That's Marianne, who, a sad picture, she's an alcoholic. My mother was an alcoholic, so I told her she would show me beautiful pictures of her daughter, who's a nurse, and she was very proud of. And I said, you really should stop drinking. She'll never stop. I gave her a ride home. And you can see the sadness in her face. Go ahead. London, Archive of Modern Conflict said, why don't you do a book on London? And I was here for, I think, Caleb said 5 trips. I photographed about a month total, okay? So it's not a lot. Go ahead. That's in Kensington. Oxford Circus, I think. Kensington. In the East End, Brick Lane. Go ahead. That's a junkie in the East End. He's a nasty piece of work. But, I asked, he said, okay. And Caleb told me he just saw him 6 weeks ago. Obviously, you see, he got sliced up a little bit. It's the kind, unfortunately, that does deserve it, okay, I have to admit. And I empathize because I was a drug addict, okay? I almost died on cocaine, so go ahead. I love his eyebrows. Go ahead. This is, before I started to do the color portraits, I started to do them in black and white. This is in Essex. I forget the town. But when I saw her, I knew I had a picture. I would call it, I said, I can't miss. The only way I can miss is if she says no. And she said yes. Go ahead. Caleb said to me, you can't ask him. His face is all burned. I said, listen, he has 3 daughters that are beautiful. He's well-adjusted, no problem. I asked him, he said, sure, fine. Okay, so I always like, and I'm going to give you a little dialogue here. When people, a lot of people like my pictures, some people don't like my pictures, okay? But I love these people that know, like Kadelka once told me, you don't walk in my shoes, okay? And the thing is, you can't defend other people unless you are like them. You're one of them. And if I'm comfortable and he's comfortable, most people would say, how can you do that? It worked fine. He said yes. And that you'll have these people say, oh, you can't do it. And, they sit in a chair all day and they criticize. Okay, go ahead. That's a junkie. He was great. I photographed him twice. Go ahead. Florida. What happened in Florida? Okay, yeah, that's the first time I used the Leica S. It was also postcards. It all started with Juan. And Juan was at a bus stop. We saw him, and he lived in an assisted living facility. And I used the Leica S. As soon as I took this picture, I knew that's the camera I wanted to do this project. Go ahead. That's in front of the diner in Versailles, diner and worst food in the world, Cuban food. Go ahead. I like Cuban food, but not the Versailles diner. This is another assisted living person. Go ahead. That's George, another assisted living. Darlene. She got very mad because I took a picture of her back after, and she said, but I said, I took the television screen. She said, no, you took my back. And she let me take the face, but not the back. Go ahead. That's Zapata. That's the daily dose of medicine they get in their orange juice. Go ahead. That's at another assisted living. I've done a series of waist-up portraits. That'll be another book, but I have only about 30 some odd now. Go ahead. That's Leonilda. I love her. Every day I would buy her chocolate bars and soda, and she was the sweetest woman. She weighs about 350 pounds, and she was always singing. So I said, did you ever go to a concert? She said, no. I said, I'd love to take you to a concert. So every time I've gone back to Miami, because I'm doing my hookah project there, and I go to where she was at the assisted living facility is closed, so I can't find her. Because I can see me and Leonilda. I hope my wife doesn't get jealous going to the concert. Because she deserves it. She's the sweetest woman. Go ahead. There's a story here, but I'm not going to get into it. Go ahead. There's Leonilda again. And I'm not your average person. I would hang this on my wall if we have sunlight all over our apartment, so I can't hang up any pictures. And I don't believe in hanging up my own pictures, okay? I don't want to live with them, but if it wasn't mine, I would hang it up. Go ahead. She's not assisted living. She should be. She was in Miami. Go ahead. Wow. That's a sad one. That reminds me of my mother, okay? So it's not, and it's amazing because my mother must have been with me because this lady was nonstop moving. And if you ever use a Leica S camera, the focusing is so precise that you could have the eyelash in focus and not the eye. And yet I have one that's in focus. Go ahead. This lady never said a word, and yet she was so excited for me to take a picture that she was emitting sounds. Go ahead. That's another assisted living. I like the dollar bill. She was always hustling the drivers to try and get money, and maybe for her services too. Go ahead. Black Country, I was commissioned to do by Multi-Story a commission, which I think is very good. Never been shown, never offered a show. What? Oh, it was at the Barbican, sorry. I was never offered a one-man show, and the Barbican was only faces, because there's newspaper headlines and still lifes. Go ahead. Hard Man from Newcastle and West Bromwich. Go ahead. Mandy. I love the headlines in front of the kiosks. Go ahead. Of course, look at that food. Isn't it delicious? Go ahead. Go ahead. That I offered my wife as a birthday present, but I think if I brought it to her, she would throw me out of the house. Go ahead. Another headline. Go ahead. Young boy. Peter, here's the case where, you know, it might be tough to look at, but it's, I think, a really good picture. And the thing is, you know, I bring some sunshine to his life. He was very thin-legged. He was wearing shorts. He probably was, I think he's got cancer. He's not well. I talked to him for 20 minutes. He must go home to his barren room, poor, watching black and white television. I paid attention to him. I don't do it for humanitarian purposes, but, you know, I bring something to his life, and I love the picture. Go ahead. That's, I guess, my imitation of a watch ad, but that's probably from eating a very bad diet, because he's a little blown up. Go ahead. Another one. If you notice, I looked after, you see how carefully she puts her lipstick on? She missed a little. She's got a little over there, but I asked her, you want to see the picture, which I normally don't do, and she said yes. And I said, what do you think? She said, I'm beautiful. So, you know, like I said, you know, you don't walk in my shoes. Go ahead. Go ahead. He was beaten up. I love my wife, when I showed her that picture, when we sent it from England, she said she must take an hour and a half for each eyebrow. I'm not a woman, you know. These are real, contrary to all reports. Go ahead. This is what it must be like to be poor and live in the Midlands. You know, to me, it's grease, but it looks like blood, like trying to open those doors and you can't get out. Go ahead. I went to Bogota for the Archive of Modern Conflict, and go ahead, let's go, otherwise we'll never finish. Go ahead. Oh, okay, go ahead. This is one of my favorite pictures. I started to do a series there on people in the barrio walking in front of colored walls. That's Simon, and he's the mortician, and I love this picture. So I'm going to go back to Bogota in the near future and continue. This was done about 4 years ago. Go ahead. That's another one at the walls. Go ahead. Milwaukee, we originally, again, postcards from America. Go ahead. These were the start of, that was at a mental hospital where I was allowed in. And the lady who ran it was great. She told me when she came to, we had a little lecture there, myself and several other Magnum photographers. And she said she never saw such a beautiful picture of Bill. And he was also constantly moving. That took me 20 minutes. Okay, go ahead. That's at a bus stop. Go ahead. Back of her head. That's Colleen, State Fair. Look at that makeup. I mean, wow. Her husband's an accountant. I must be something who are married to accountants because the lady who had the eyebrows, her husband was also an accountant. Go ahead. I love the sweat on the lip. And I ran into her again this year at the State Fair, and she had a different hair color, but this picture's much better. She's not very happy. Go ahead. She's a motorcycle girl who believes in the Bible. Go back. Go ahead. Go ahead. Another girl, a sad case, beautiful girl, is on crack. Well, I won't even get into it, okay? 20 years old. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Went to Mississippi, got Teppo. I ran into him. Also, assisted living facility. Go ahead. There's Teppo outside. He looks like he's going to be swallowed up by the weeds. Go ahead. I call that the shark. Go ahead. Iowa. We went to the State Fair first on a Guggenheim grant, and then I went back this year. Go ahead. That's my comment on education in America, because they say that everybody should go to college, but everybody shouldn't go to college. And it's going to be the next scam after the foreclosures, because everyone is borrowing all this money, and somebody's making a lot of money on this. Go ahead. Go ahead. That's Terry. His sister said, you know, she was a lawyer, but Terry wanted his picture taken. They were at the fair. Go ahead. Ohio. Snake. 3 generations of a family. Go ahead. Another hooker, a drug addict. She's anorexic. What a nice woman. I asked her, what do you do? She says, I make jewelry. I said, listen, I'm sorry it's taking me a long time. She said, take your time. Oh, she said, excuse me, her husband makes jewelry. She cleans houses. Go ahead. Go ahead. I went up to her on the porch. There was a nurse there. She said, Bonnie, let the gentleman take your picture. And all of a sudden, the cat came out. So I said, why don't we go in the street and look at the little eyes, look at the eyes. I mean, I was lucky, okay? But the more pictures you take or the more time you spend, the more you get lucky, if you have a little talent. Go ahead. Minnesota State Fair. This was taken this summer. It reminds me of a Magritte painting. Go ahead. That's his sister. When I saw them in 2014, among that day, there was 272,000 people at the fair. I was totally burnt out. They have 5 kids. You know, it's an incredible family. Okay, go ahead. So I started to do an essay on the food at the fair, because, you know, you start to get bored and you walk around, so you got to find another subject. Go ahead. I asked my assistant, can you bite into that? And he doesn't like it as much as I don't like it, but I pay him, so go ahead. Look at that pizza. Go ahead. That's called an Australian potato. I asked somebody from Australia who was in the crowd at a lecture recently. They said they never heard of it. Okay. What I like about that, it looks like, you know, it's a Trump law. I mean, it's just incredible, the little wall there behind. How much time we have left?
About 15 minutes.
Oh, we'll get done. Okay, let's go. Los Angeles, went out to photograph. Go ahead. I don't love the picture, but I love that shirt. That's a lady. Go ahead. Another lady. Las Vegas. Go ahead. It was foggy that morning, and to me it looks like, you know, the dinosaurs, whatever it is. My assistant knows all about dinosaurs, so he told me what kind it is, but I apologize, I don't remember. Go ahead. I started a project on women who work at the casinos, but it's very hard to get access, and I have to go to the older casinos because that's where the older women work. Go ahead. That's a transvestite, and I asked him, well, we found him in the supermarket the day we arrived. So we made an appointment that we could photograph him. So I asked him, what do you do for a living? He said, I'm an escort. Go ahead. She's beautiful, 70 years old, very nice figure. And I said to her, I said, I bet you had 3 husbands. Because I'm a, you know, if I feel something, I'll ask it. So she said, no, I've had 7. Go ahead. Another story, but let's go. I had a project for RATP, which is the French transportation system, and the pictures were in 17 stations in Paris, huge pictures that looked wonderful. And I had like 4 days in each city, and I tore my hamstring, so I had to like do it back to back to back to back, and I had to go to Japan for 2 weeks after. I thought I was dead. Go ahead. New York, go ahead. New York, New York. They wouldn't print this picture, okay? So, you know, I don't agree with that, you know, because obviously they're afraid to do anything or make a statement, okay? There's no statement here. It's just a, you know, a Muslim lady. I mean, go ahead. Go ahead. They wouldn't allow this in the book because the guy's grandson complained. So for me, I would have fought them because to me, I believe in the rights of man. And, you know, that's what their system is based on, the rights. So where are my rights? And he was kind. You know, he was fine, and there's nothing wrong with the picture. He looks elegant. He looks distinguished. Go ahead. This guy, he didn't want the picture, so we had to take it off the metro wall or something. Is that correct, Sophie? Go ahead. Then I went to South Africa. I had 2 bodyguards because, you know, you can't walk around downtown Johannesburg without somebody, because if it's not one day, the next day someone's going to reach for your camera. So I felt like a rock star. It was good. Go ahead. Go ahead. That's one of my bodyguards. Not the little one, the big guy. Go ahead. That's the other one, and his name is Innocence. He's great. I love him. If I go back, I'm definitely, if he's around, I'm gonna use him. And that's a very famous musician. I don't know who he is, but go ahead. Go ahead. That's Manchester. The weather was terrible. My assistant had about 103 fever. We didn't do very well. Go ahead. I hope the football team does better tomorrow against Chelsea. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Then we went to Hong Kong. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Then Leica commissioned me to go anywhere I wanted. I chose Detroit. Go ahead. Oh, looks like an Edmund Monk, The Scream. Go ahead. That's a baptism. You know, it's really a fake baptism. They come to where all the junkies are and the poor people, and they dunk them a little bit. They give them a little food. They give them a little clothes, you know, so go ahead. That's Yaya. She made the portrait. She just put her arm up, and, you know, I couldn't do better. Go ahead. That's a black Muslim. I got out of the car. I saw him. I said to him, he says, hey, brother, how you doing? So I knew I had him. I said, let's go out in the middle of the street, and, you know, let's do the picture. So, you know, we did the picture. Sad story. I got out of the car again, and I said to her, I said, I bet you're a model. You're a model. She said, yes, and she started to cry profusely. Because I tell her how she walked, because she's a junkie, and she said she's dying. And nice girl, very nice girl. Go ahead. That's what it is, even though it's not really what it is. That's what it is when you work your whole life and your back is broken, and this is what you wind up in the end with no money, no nothing, okay? I'm always for the underdog, okay? Go ahead. Miami, okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I like the little fly. Go ahead. Go ahead. I love her hairpin. Go ahead. Farm Boys and Farm Girls, which I have a show here, so we'll go through fast. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. I have plenty of stories, but next time. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. That's Jenna. I love Jenna. I mean, she was a fierce competitor. I watched her in the ring, and then she lost, so they took her out. I watched her. She was just looking at everyone so fiercely. And then when we took the picture, I asked her parents, because she's 12, I said, you're a fierce competitor. She said, yes. I said, show me. You lost, right? So that's what you get. Go ahead. 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 Ah, My final series, right? Okay. This is the genesis of this story is a little difficult for me to say, and my wife doesn't always agree with it, but my mother was a prostitute, okay? But she was a prostitute from the house. So I suffered a lot. You know, my father was there, and they were in tandem, okay? Because I think he had a thing for that, okay? And I would hear the discussions. I'd be woken up in the middle of the night. You know, she had cigarette burns. I mean, it's tough. And when your father is a gangster type, you learn as a kid that you say nothing, okay? So I suffered my whole life, and I could have, if I didn't find the outlet of photography, I would have really been in trouble. So now I decided I would like to do a series on hookers who do crack and heroin. So I've been doing it in Overtown. It's quite dangerous, but you know, I think I'm streetwise enough that I'm able to do it, okay? So these are some of the pictures. Go ahead. And I started to do interviews with the women, and every one of them have been raped. And, you know, I can't, there's nothing I can say, okay? Just look at them. Go ahead. But this is the project I really want to finish before I stop photography. Go ahead. She reminds me of my aunt, because she's Jewish like me, and she got hooked on heroin because she used opioids for her back. She was in pain, and then she started to snort heroin. And when I first met her, she was snorting heroin in 2014 or 15, and she had beautiful clothes. She didn't fit in this area. So now when I met her in 2017, she has no teeth, she shoots heroin, she lost all her clothes, and her name is Trisha. Go ahead. There she is. Looks like my aunt. I think she has no hair because she wears a wig all the time. Go ahead. Yvette. Reminds me of an old French painting. Go ahead. This is a sad story. Her name is Texas. And I said to her, I said, you know, you're really wasting your life. I don't proselytize. I just make a quick statement. She said, I like what I do. She said, I'll stop when I don't enjoy it any longer, but she's dead. She OD'd. Go ahead, next picture. The next day, you see, she looks like a fashion model, except look at all these scars. Look at that. I mean, whew, go ahead. Go ahead. That's the title of the project, Only God Can Judge Me. I think that, one more, that's it, right? Sleeping Beauty. You know, that was a beautiful young girl, 23 years old. She's alive. She was knotted out totally, and there's a whole story, but I think that's it. Is that it? Yeah, but that's just the Barbican show. Okay, so if you have any questions, let's go.
We've got time for 2 or 3 questions, depending on how long.
What?
Probably got time for 2 or 3 questions.
2 or 3 questions. You want to put the lights on?
Quick you are. Okay, who's got a question? Anyone?
Only if you put the lights on. I'm not answering any questions. I got to see who my adversaries are. What? Oh, you have no lights. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Gilden, the kind of photography that you take, somebody who's starting off, what advice can you give to them?
Have the background I had.
Beautiful.
That's what it comes to. You know, you realize that I can tell you all I do, and you can tell me all you do. You're you, I'm me. Maybe, you know, you can do it better than me. Maybe you can do whatever, but you can only be who you are. And I've always been for the underdog. I'm angry. I'm sad deep down, you know. But the thing is, look, I could have been a lot of other things and not good things, okay? So I look at it, what my father and mother gave me. It's a gift. But I had to be strong enough to take that gift. My mother committed suicide. I almost died on drugs after that. But I got through all of it. So when people criticize me, you're not going to criticize me. You better have a good reason to criticize me, because I will tear your throat out. No, and I mean that really. My wife knows, okay? And yet my wife is with me 27 years, so she knows I'm not into hitting women. I don't hit her. I don't hit my daughter. You know, I'm a nice guy at heart. But I learned to be tough, and I learned to read people. So when I go to Overtown, it took me 3 trips to be able to go under the bridge till I felt good. But once I'm under the bridge, I'm fine. Because I read the situation, it's fine. You have to know where you are and what you're doing and who you're doing it with. I have a talent for that. It was beyond photography. And, you know, I always photograph myself. Next question.
How do you compile your work?
I don't. What?
How do you know which pictures fits with the other pictures? Because some works or some of your photos seem to be stronger than the others, for example.
Well, that always happens. I mean, look, I went to a Gary Winogrand show and I saw 450 pictures. I counted 43 good ones. And I think I have 40, okay? I can rest assured of that, okay? You might say it's ego, I think it's reality, okay? So everything can't be good. And if you're going to do a book, you can't do a book of your best bets. You have to, you know, it goes like this, okay? I can sit through with you here now and show you which are the good ones and which aren't as good. You know, and I know it's a lot to ask to sit through 274 pictures. Only, I think, 2 people left, so that's not too bad. But I don't disagree with you. But if you're going to come to hear anybody lecture, I think my work stands up, okay, against anybody's, all right? And I earned it because, you know, I lived my life. My first wife said to me, when you're 70, she said, you know, you shouldn't remarry because you'll be very happy. You'll have a room full of photographs and be surrounded by them. So my wife knows what photography means to me, but she also knows what she means to me because I don't think I can do it without her. So, you know, what can I say? Anyway, one more question.
Very quickly, maybe. Thanks very much for your works, Bruce. Very interesting.
Where is this coming from? Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't you need release forms to get all these pictures?
Well, I can't. You want to come a little closer?
Don't you need release forms to get all of these pictures?
No, you don't need a release.
To get it published? Isn't it illegal?
You don't need a release.
Okay.
Depends on the country. You know, in France, they'll, you know, they tell you the rights of man, but they don't allow you to do anything. I don't even need a release for the 17-year-old kids, which surprised me. Because you can photograph anybody as long as they're in a public place in America. So, you know, they may mind, you know, you have to be respectful. Go ahead.
Should we do one more?
Yeah, one more. These are easy questions. No one has a tough one here.
Okay, this may be tough. So I'm looking at your work.
One second. He's got, everyone's got, oh, you're there, okay. Because he's trying to be you.
Oh, is he? Okay. Good for him. So I see the evolution of your work, and I've followed your work for a while. So do you think that you've completely evolved and what you have inside is what you're showing now, or is there more evolution to you?
I don't know. Only God, and I don't know if there's a God, can answer that, okay? Look, one thing I will tell you. Hello? Are you still there? Okay, you don't have to give up. I'm not doing a search and frisk here. No, the thing is that when I can't do it any longer, I will quit. Because I will tell you, there are too many photographers out there that took good pictures when they were young that can't do it for the last 20 years. And I'm not going to be seen like that because I was an athlete. Not at the pro level, but the thing to me is when you can't do it, you stop. And hopefully I can still do it. Next half year, a year will tell, because a lot of the farm boys were done the last year, so I can still do it. But look, you have to make concessions to age. What happens with age, especially a street photographer that's very physical like myself, I lunge at people, okay? So I have had 3 torn calves, 1 torn hamstring. It becomes rather difficult. So I decided to do more portraits, okay? Also, I got bored photographing in New York. I was on the streets 25 years. And I wasted my time for a few years there, and then I found something to photograph. So the other thing is, what you lose in physicality, you gain in experience. That's not great for street photography, but I love all these photographers who do the same thing they did at 20. I challenge any of them to do it as well at 50. You've lost the passion, the drive, the initiative. You know, it just doesn't work. You know, for most, you know, you could show me, maybe someone does it, I don't know. I'm not an authority. Is there one more?
Yeah, just this gentleman here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce, I think your work's brilliant. It is confronting. Over the...
I didn't hear you, sir.
Sorry?
Speak a little slower.
I'm sorry.
I'm getting a little deaf. Also, I'm very tired. Go ahead.
Sorry, Bruce. I think your work is brilliant. Brilliant.
Okay, so now what's going to happen? Let's go.
I think your work's brilliant.
You know, someone says you're great, and they tell you, hey, but look what you just said to my wife. Whack. Okay, go ahead. Let's go.
But I think your work is quite confronting.
Yeah.
So over the decades, what has your view on humanity, how has your view on humanity evolved?
I don't think it's evolved. I think what I've learned is that what I feel about humanity is the reality. Okay? In other words, I've been proven correct.
So where do you think we're going?
I don't think we're going in a great place, but I don't know. Maybe, you know, it's been like that forever. Because if you read, I read a lot, okay? Because I didn't have a very good education, so I try to better myself, all right? And I've read a lot of books. And I read a lot of books on New York specifically, okay? Not only, but, and if you read something, let's say a paragraph in one of those books, 1890s, you'll think they're talking about 2000 or 2010. The place is a horrible place. The poor are, you know, over here. The rich are over here. The separation, the divide is greater, okay? I mean, look at the world. I mean, you have politicians, right? Can you believe what they say? Look at the climate. I mean, come on. What are we doing? People care. Look, I moved out of New York City, and I'm glad I moved out because now it's a place for the rich. I mean, they have no soul. Not all rich people, okay? But it's a soulless place, okay? Same thing's happening all over, all right? Money talks, and, you know, people have to leave. And now also, everything is politically correct, which is bullshit to me, okay? Because I don't believe in it. And all the decisions, you know, people don't think for themselves a lot, you know? I have reasons for what I believe in, okay? And I'll explain it to anybody. I don't believe that everyone should be a sheep. You know, you don't have to stick up for all of this or all of that, okay? You stick up when it's necessary to stick up for somebody, okay? I'm not paying for the sins of my forefathers, okay? This I could tell you. And that's what I believe strongly. And yet, I'll help somebody, you know. For me, I'm always for the underdog, okay? But I'm not going to let the guy mug me because he's a junkie, you know. You know, I don't care what it is. You know, look, I had it tough. I survived. So, you know, what can I say? Go ahead. My wife told me enough because otherwise I'll go off on it.
Okay, I think that is the end of the talk.
Is that it? Thank you.
Can we all thank Bruce for coming and giving us a great talk?